Sarah Martinez pushed her cleaning cart down the long hallway of Whitmore Academy. The wheels made a soft, squeaking sound on the polished floor. It was past 9 in the evening, and the school was quiet now. All the students had gone home hours ago. Sarah liked this time of night. The building felt peaceful, and she could work without anyone watching her. She had been cleaning at Whitmore Academy for 3 years now. It was not the job she had dreamed of as a young girl, but it paid the bills. Sarah was 34 years old and lived alone in a small apartment across town. She had never married and had no children. Her life was simple and quiet, just the way she had grown up. Sarah came from a family that did not have much money. Her parents had worked hard jobs their whole lives. Her father fixed cars at a garage, and her mother cleaned houses for rich families. They had taught Sarah to work hard and be grateful for what she had. Music lessons and piano classes were things for other families, not for people like them. As Sarah cleaned the windows in the hallway, she heard something that made her stop. It was piano music coming from one of the practice rooms. Someone was playing a beautiful song that she had never heard before. The notes seemed to float through the air like magic. Sarah put down her cleaning cloth and walked quietly toward the sound. She had heard music in this building many times before. Whitmore Academy was famous for teaching music to rich children. The students here learned to play piano, violin, and other instruments that Sarah could only dream of touching. Their parents paid thousands of dollars every year so their children could have the best music teachers in the city. Sarah pressed her ear against the door of the practice room. Inside, a young girl was playing a piece that sounded like water flowing over rocks. The music was soft and gentle, then suddenly strong and powerful. Sarah closed her eyes and let the sounds wash over her. For a moment, she forgot she was just a cleaning lady. She forgot about her old uniform and her tired hands. She felt like she was floating. When the music stopped, Sarah quickly moved away from the door. She did not want anyone to catch her listening. She went back to her cleaning cart and continued her work, but the music stayed in her head. She hummed the melody quietly as she mopped the floors and emptied the trash cans. This was not the first time Sarah had been drawn to the music at Whitmore Academy. Ever since she started working here, she found herself stopping to listen whenever she heard someone playing. The students were so talented, much more skilled than she could ever imagine being. They played pieces that sounded impossible to her ears. Sarah had always loved music, even as a little girl. When she was young, she would sit by the radio for hours listening to different songs and trying to sing along. She dreamed of learning to play an instrument, but her family could not afford lessons. When other kids in her neighborhood got guitars or keyboards for their birthdays, Sarah got practical gifts like clothes or school supplies. In high school, Sarah had tried to join the music class, but she felt out of place. All the other students already knew how to read music and play instruments. Sarah felt embarrassed because she knew nothing about music theory or proper technique. After a few weeks, she dropped the class and never tried again. Years later, when Sarah got her first real job after high school, she had saved enough money to buy something special for herself. She went to a thrift store and found an old electronic keyboard for $50. It was missing some keys and the sound was not perfect, but it was hers. She took it home to her tiny apartment and tried to teach herself how to play, learning piano from books and internet videos was much harder than Sarah had expected. Her fingers felt clumsy on the keys, and she could not read the music sheets that came with her keyboard. But she kept trying, a little bit each day after work. She learned to play simple songs like Happy Birthday and Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. It was not much, but it made her happy. The keyboard sat in the corner of her living room, covered with an old bedsheet when she was not using it. Sarah did not tell anyone about her musical hobby. She was afraid people would laugh at a grown woman trying to learn piano by herself. Her neighbors in the apartment building never heard her practice because she always used headphones. As Sarah continued cleaning the school that night, she thought about the music she had just heard. The student had played with such confidence and skill. Sarah wondered what it would feel like to play like that, to make music that beautiful and powerful. She imagined sitting at a real piano, not her cheap keyboard, and playing a song that would make people stop and listen, but those were just dreams. Sarah knew her place in the world. She was a cleaning lady, not a musician. She had missed her chance to learn music when she was young, and now it was too late. Adults like her did not become piano players. That was for people who had started. As children, people whose families had money for lessons and good instruments. Still, as Sarah pushed her cart to the next hallway, she could not stop thinking about the music. She hummed the melody from the practice room and tried to imagine how it would feel under her fingers. The notes seemed to call to her, telling her stories she wanted to understand. Sarah had no idea that her life was about to change in ways she could never imagine. She did not know that her secret love of music would soon become something much more than a hobby. All she knew was that the music at Whitmore Academy made her feel alive in a way that nothing else did. As she finished her work that night and prepared to go home, Sarah took one last look at the practice rooms. Tomorrow night she would be back to clean again. And maybe, just maybe, she would hear more of that beautiful music that seemed to speak directly to her heart. Sarah turned off the lights and locked the building behind her. She walked to her old car in the parking lot, still humming the melody from the practice room. She did not know it yet, but this was the beginning of something extraordinary. 3 weeks had passed since Sarah first stopped to listen to the music at Whitmore Academy. Every night she found herself hoping to hear someone practicing. Sometimes the building was completely silent, and Sarah felt disappointed as she cleaned the empty hallways. But other nights, beautiful music would drift from the practice rooms, and Sarah would pause in her work to listen. She had started to recognize different students by their playing styles. There was a boy who played fast, energetic pieces that made Sarah want to dance. A girl always practiced the same sad, slow song that made Sarah think of rainy days. Another student played jazz music that reminded Sarah of the old movies she watched on television. On this particular Thursday night in late October, Sarah noticed something different as she entered the main building. The auditorium doors were open and soft light spilled into the hallway. Usually the auditorium was locked after school hours. Sarah was curious, so she quietly pushed her cart toward the open doors and looked inside. The large auditorium was empty except for the beautiful grand piano on the stage. Sarah had seen this piano many times while cleaning, but always from far away. Tonight, someone had left the cover open, and the stage lights were still on. The piano looked like a sleeping giant, black and shiny under the warm lights. Sarah had never seen anything so beautiful. Her little keyboard at home looked like a toy compared to this magnificent instrument. She could see the white and black keys gleaming, and she wondered what it would sound like to play real music on a real piano. She looked around to make sure no one was watching, then quietly walked down the aisle toward the stage. Her heart was beating fast. She was not supposed to be in here, but she could not help herself. The piano seemed to be calling to her. Sarah climbed the steps to the stage. Up close, the piano was even more impressive. It was huge, much bigger than she had expected. The wood was polished so well that she could see her reflection in it. Above the keys, gold letters spelled out Steinway and Sons. Sarah did not know much about pianos, but she knew that Steinway was a famous name. She looked around the auditorium one more time. The seats were empty and the building was silent. Sarah knew she should go back to her cleaning, but something stronger than fear was pulling her toward the piano bench. She had dreamed of playing a real piano for so many years. This might be her only chance. Sarah sat down on the bench and placed her hands on the keys. They felt cool and smooth under her fingers. She took a deep breath and began to play the only complete song she knew by heart, Für Elise by Beethoven. She had learned it slowly on her keyboard at home, practicing the same sections over and over until she could play it without looking at her hands. The sound that came from the grand piano was like nothing Sarah had ever heard before. Each note was rich and full, filling the entire auditorium. Her simple melody, which sounded thin and electronic on her keyboard, now sounded warm and alive. Sarah felt like she was not just playing music, she was creating something magical. She closed her eyes and let her fingers move across the keys. The familiar melody flowed from her hands, but it sounded different on this beautiful instrument, more emotional, more real. Sarah felt tears in her eyes as she played. She had never experienced anything like this before. When she finished the song, Sarah sat quietly for a moment, her hands still resting on the keys. The last notes seemed to hang in the air around her. She felt like she had just discovered a secret part of herself that she never knew existed. Suddenly, Sarah heard the sound of clapping behind her. She spun around on the bench, her heart jumping. With fear, a woman was standing in the doorway of the auditorium, smiling and clapping her hands slowly. "That was beautiful," the woman said as she walked down the aisle toward the stage. "I'm sorry if I startled you. I came back to get some sheet music I forgot and I heard someone playing." Sarah stood up quickly from the piano bench. Her face was red with embarrassment. "I'm sorry," she said. "I know I'm not supposed to be here. I was just ... I was cleaning and I saw the piano and I—" The woman held up her hand to stop Sarah from talking. "Please, don't apologize. You play beautifully. I'm Dr. Elizabeth Chun, the music director here at Whitmore Academy." "And you are?" "Sarah Martinez," Sarah said quietly. "I'm the night cleaner." Dr. Chun climbed the steps to the stage. She was a small Asian woman with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a neat bun. She wore a long coat and carried a leather bag full of papers. "How long have you been playing piano, Sarah?" Dr. Chun asked. Sarah looked down at her hands. "Not very long. I taught myself on an old keyboard I bought at a thrift store. I can only play a few simple songs." "That didn't sound simple to me," Dr. Chun said. "Your interpretation of Fur Elise was quite lovely. You have natural musical instincts." Sarah could not believe what she was hearing. A real music teacher was saying nice things about her playing? She had always thought her musical attempts were clumsy and amateur. "Have you ever had formal piano lessons?" Dr. Chun asked. Sarah shook her head. "My family couldn't afford lessons when I was young. I always wanted to learn, but—" She did not finish the sentence. Dr. Chun walked over to the piano and sat down on the bench. She played a few notes, testing the sound. "It's never too late to learn music, Sarah. In fact, adult students sometimes make faster progress than children because they have more focus and determination." Sarah watched as Dr. Chun's fingers moved gracefully across the keys. She played a short, beautiful melody that Sarah did not recognize. "I have an idea," Dr. Chun said, turning to face Sarah. "I need someone to help me with small tasks around the music department. Filing papers, organizing sheet music, that sort of thing. In exchange, you could use one of our practice rooms during your breaks. What do you think?" Sarah stared at Dr. Chun in shock. "You would let me practice here, on real pianos? Why not?" Dr. Chun smiled. "Music should be shared, not locked away. This building has practice rooms that sit empty most evenings. It seems silly not to use them." Sarah felt like she was dreaming. "But I don't know how to read music very well. I'm not a real musician." "Everyone starts somewhere," Dr. Chun said. "I can recommend some beginner books that will help you learn to read music, and who knows, maybe you have more talent than you realize." Sarah looked around the beautiful auditorium, then back at the grand piano. A few minutes ago, she was just a cleaning lady who sometimes listened to music through closed doors. Now, a real music teacher was offering to help her learn. "I would like that very much," Sarah said softly. Dr. Chun stood up and gathered her papers. "Wonderful. We can start next week. Practice room 3 is usually empty between 8 and 10 in the evening. I'll leave some beginner books for you at the front desk." As Dr. Chun walked toward the exit, she turned back to Sarah. "And Sarah, don't be afraid to dream big. Music has a way of surprising us." After Dr. Chun left, Sarah sat back down at the piano. She played Fur Elise one more time, but now it sounded different. It sounded like the beginning of something new. Sarah could barely sleep that weekend. She kept thinking about her conversation with Dr. Chun and the incredible offer to practice at the school. Part of her worried that it had all been a dream, but when she arrived at work on Monday night, there was a small package waiting for her at the front desk with her name on it. Inside the package were 3 beginner piano books and a note from Dr. Chun. The note said, "Practice room 3 is yours between 8 and 10 p.m. Take your time and enjoy the journey." Music is about joy, not perfection. Sarah held the books like they were precious treasures. She had never owned real piano instruction books before. Everything she had learned came from watching free videos on her phone or trying to copy songs. She heard on the radio that first night Sarah finished her cleaning duties as quickly as possible. At exactly 8 o'clock, she walked nervously to practice room 3. The door was unlocked, just as Dr. Chun had promised. Inside was a small but beautiful upright piano, much nicer than her keyboard at home. Sarah sat down and opened the first book. It started with very basic lessons about hand position and finger exercises. Even though Sarah thought she already knew how to play, she realized she had been doing many things wrong. The book showed her how to curve her fingers properly and how to sit at the correct height. For the next 2 hours, Sarah worked through the simple exercises. Some of them felt silly, just playing one note at a time with different fingers, but she could feel the difference they made. Her hands felt more relaxed and the notes sounded cleaner. When 10 o'clock came, Sarah did not want to stop. She carefully closed the piano and gathered her books. Walking back to finish her cleaning duties, she felt like she was floating on air. She had practiced on a real piano at a real music school. Night after night, Sarah returned to practice room 3. She worked through the beginner books slowly and carefully. The exercises taught her how to read simple music notation, something she had always found confusing before. Dr. Chun had chosen books that explained everything in clear, easy language. After 2 weeks, Sarah felt brave enough to try playing some of the simple songs in the books. They were not exciting pieces, children's songs like "Mary Had a Little Lamb" and "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star," but reading them from sheet music instead of playing them from memory felt like a huge accomplishment. Sometimes, Dr. Chen would stop by the practice room to check on Sarah's progress. She was always encouraging and patient, never making Sarah feel embarrassed about her slow progress or simple questions. "You're developing good habits," Dr. Chun told her one evening. Many adult students rush through the basics and develop bad technique that's hard to fix later. You're being smart by taking your time. Sarah had been practicing at Whitmore Academy for about a month when Dr. Chun made another surprising offer. "I have a proposal for you," Dr. Chun said one Thursday evening. "I need help organizing the music library. It's a big job that would take several hours each week. In exchange, I could give you some basic piano lessons during your practice time. What do you think?" Sarah's eyes grew wide. "You would teach me yourself?" "I'd be happy to," Dr. Chun smiled. "You're making good progress on your own, but a few lessons could help you move forward faster." Sarah wanted to say yes immediately, but she hesitated. "I can't pay for lessons. I know music teachers charge a lot of money." "This wouldn't be about money," Dr. Chun said. "I need help with the library, and you need instruction. It's a fair trade." That weekend, Sarah spent hours in the music library with Dr. Chun, learning how to organize sheet music by composer and difficulty level. The library was much larger than Sarah had expected, with thousands of pieces of music stacked on shelves and in filing cabinets. "This is the work of many years," Dr. Chun explained as they sorted through piles of music. "Previous music directors just kept adding new music without organizing what was already here. I've been meaning to tackle this project for months." Sarah enjoyed the work. She liked seeing all the different types of music, classical pieces by famous composers, modern songs, jazz arrangements, and music from around the world. Some of the sheet music was very old, with yellowed pages and careful handwritten notes in the margins. "Students and teachers have been writing in these margins for decades," Dr. Chun told her. "Those little notes are part of the history of this music." As they worked, Dr. Chun told Sarah stories about the composers and the pieces they were organizing. Sarah learned that Beethoven was deaf when he wrote some of his most famous music, and that Mozart started composing when he was only 5 years old. Music has always been a way for people to express feelings that are too big for words, Dr. Chun said. Every piece tells a story, even if the composer never wrote down what that story was supposed to be. After they finished organizing for the day, Dr. Chun gave Sarah her first real piano lesson. They worked on a simple piece called Ode to Joy by Beethoven. It was much more beautiful than the children's songs Sarah had been practicing. This is the same Beethoven who wrote Für Elise, Dr. Chun explained. He had a gift for writing melodies that stay in your heart long after you stop playing them. Sarah's fingers felt clumsy at first as she tried to play the new piece. The notes were more complicated than anything she had attempted before, and she kept making mistakes. Don't worry about playing it perfectly, Dr. Chun said. Just focus on one measure at a time. Music is built note by note, just like a house is built brick by brick. By the end of the lesson, Sarah could play the first few lines of Ode to Joy slowly but correctly. When she played those familiar notes, she felt a connection to something much larger than herself. She was playing the same music that people had loved for hundreds of years. Over the next few weeks, Sarah's practice sessions became the best part of her day. She would hurry through her cleaning duties, counting the minutes until 8 o'clock when she could go to practice room 3. Her fingers were getting stronger, and she was starting to read music much more easily. Dr. Chun continued to give her lessons once a week, always building on what Sarah had learned before. They worked on simple classical pieces, folk songs from different countries, and even some easy jazz arrangements. You have good musical instincts, Dr. Chun told her one evening. You understand how music should feel, not just how it should. Sound, that's something you can't teach. It has to come from inside. Sarah was gaining confidence with each lesson. She still made plenty of mistakes, but she was no longer afraid of the piano. Her hands felt natural on the keys, and she was starting to add her own small touches to the pieces she played. One evening in late November, as Sarah was practicing a gentle piece called Clair de Lune, Dr. Chun appeared in the doorway of the practice room. She listened quietly until Sarah finished the piece. Beautiful, Dr. Chun said. You've come so far in just 2 months. I think you're ready for a bigger challenge. Sarah turned on the piano bench to face her teacher. What kind of challenge? Dr. Chun sat down next to Sarah on the bench. The winter concert is coming up in December. It's our biggest event of the year with students, parents, and community members. I know this might sound crazy, but I think you should consider performing. Sarah felt her heart stop beating for a moment. Me? Perform in front of people? But I'm just learning. I'm not good enough for that. You're better than you think, Dr. Chun said gently. And music isn't about being perfect. It's about sharing something beautiful with others. You have that gift, Sarah. Sarah looked down at her hands. The idea of playing in front of an audience terrified her, but it also excited her in a way she had never felt before. I'll think about it, she said quietly. As Sarah walked home that night, she tried to imagine herself on stage playing piano. For a real audience, it seemed impossible, but then again, 3 months ago she never would have imagined herself playing piano at all. Maybe Dr. Chun was right. Maybe it was time for a bigger challenge. Sarah spent the entire weekend thinking about Dr. Chun's suggestion. The idea of performing in front of people made her stomach feel nervous, but she could not stop imagining what it would be like to share her music with others. She had been practicing alone for 2 months, and sometimes she wondered what her playing sounded like to other people. On Monday night, Sarah arrived at work with her decision made. She found Dr. Chun in her office, grading papers from student lessons. I want to try, Sarah said from the doorway. I want to perform in the winter concert. Dr. Chun looked up with a bright smile. I'm so glad, Sarah. I think this will be a wonderful experience for you. But I'm scared, Sarah admitted. What if I make mistakes? What if people think I don't belong there? Dr. Chun set down her pen and looked directly at Sarah. Everyone gets nervous before performing. Even professional musicians feel afraid sometimes. But music is about courage as much as it is about skill. When you share your music with others, you're giving them a gift. Dr. Chun explained that the winter concert would take place on December 15th, which was only 3 weeks away. Most of the students had been preparing their pieces for months, but Dr. Chun had a plan for Sarah. "There's a piece I'd like you to learn," Dr. Chun said, walking to her filing cabinet. "It's a simplified arrangement of Chopin's Minute Waltz. It's challenging but not impossible, and it's beautiful enough to impress the audience." Sarah took the sheet music and looked at it. The notes seemed to dance across the page in patterns she had never seen before. It looked much more complicated than anything she had played so far. "This looks very difficult," Sarah said, feeling worried. "It is more advanced than what you've been playing," Dr. Chun agreed. "But I believe you can learn it if you practice every night." The beautiful thing about this piece is that it tells a story through music. Once you understand the story, the notes will make more sense. Dr. Chun sat at the piano in her office and played a few measures of the piece. The music was light and playful, like a dancer spinning in circles. Sarah could hear why it was called a waltz. It had the rhythm of dancing. "The minute waltz is not actually supposed to be played in 1 minute," Dr. Chun explained. That's a common mistake. Chopin wrote it to feel like a small dog chasing its tail in circles. It should be playful and joyful, not rushed. That night, Sarah began working on the new piece. It was much harder than anything she had attempted before. Her fingers stumbled over the quick passages, and she had trouble reading some of the more complex notation. But she could hear the beauty in the music, even when she played it slowly and made mistakes. Dr. Chun had been right about the piece telling a story. Sarah could imagine the little dog spinning and playing as she practiced the circling melodies. When she got frustrated with the difficult parts, she would think about the story and remember that the music was supposed to be fun. Every night, Sarah practiced for her full 2 hours. She worked on small sections of the piece, playing them over and over until her fingers remembered the patterns. Some parts were easier than others, but the fast sections in the middle gave her trouble. After a week of practice, Sarah felt like she was not making progress fast enough. Her fingers were getting stronger, but the piece still sounded choppy and uncertain. She was starting to worry that she had made a mistake by agreeing to perform. Dr. Chun noticed Sarah's frustration during their weekly lesson. "You're putting too much pressure on yourself," she said. "Learning a piece like this takes time. Let's work on it together." They spent the entire lesson on just the first page of the music. Dr. Chun showed Sarah how to use her wrist to make the notes flow more smoothly and how to think about the phrase structures instead of individual notes. "Music is like speaking a language," Dr. Chun explained. "You don't speak one word at a time. You speak in sentences and paragraphs. The same is true with piano. Think about musical phrases, not just single notes." This advice helped Sarah understand the piece in a new way. Instead of worrying about each individual note, she started thinking about the larger shapes of the melody. The music began to flow more naturally under her fingers. By the second week of December, Sarah was playing the entire piece from beginning to end, though not without mistakes. She could feel the story of the playful dog in the music, and sometimes she even smiled while she played. But then, 5 days before the concert, something unexpected happened. Dr. Chun called Sarah into her office with bad news. "I just received a phone call from Mrs. Patterson," Dr. Chun said. "Her daughter Emily has come down with pneumonia and won't be able to perform in the concert." Sarah felt sorry for Emily, who was one of the advanced students. "That's terrible. Will she be okay?" "She recovered, but she definitely can't perform this weekend," Dr. Chun said. "The problem is that Emily was supposed to play the original version of Minute Waltz, the full, complex arrangement that you've been learning the simplified version of." Sarah did not understand why this was a problem. "Can't someone else play Emily's piece?" Dr. Chun shook her head. "All the other advanced students are already performing their own pieces. We don't have anyone else who knows the Chopin well enough to perform it on such short notice." Sarah began to understand what Dr. Chun was thinking, and the idea frightened her. You're not suggesting that I know it sounds crazy, Dr. Chen said quickly, but you've been learning this piece for 2 weeks. With a few modifications, I think you could perform the simplified version in Emily's place. But the audience will be expecting the full version, Sarah protested. Emily is one of your best students. I'm just a beginner. Dr. Chen leaned forward in her chair. Sarah, you've made incredible progress in just 2 months. Your simplified version is beautiful, and most people in the audience won't know the difference between your arrangement and Emily's. Sarah felt panic rising in her chest. The concert was only 5 days away. She had been preparing to play for her first audience, but now Dr. Chen was asking her to fill in for one of the school's top students. What if I embarrass myself? What? If I embarrass you in the school? Sarah asked. The only way you could embarrass anyone is if you don't try, Dr. Chen said gently. I wouldn't ask this of you if I didn't believe you could do it, but the decision is yours. Sarah looked down at her hands. These were the same hands that had cleaned classrooms and emptied trash cans for years. Now Dr. Chen was asking her to use these hands to save the winter concert. Can I think about it? Sarah asked. Of course. But I need to know by tomorrow night so I can make other arrangements if necessary. That night, Sarah barely slept. She kept imagining herself on stage, playing in front of hundreds of people. Sometimes in her imagination she played beautifully and everyone applauded. Other times she forgot the music completely and ran off. Stage and shame. The next evening, Sarah found Dr. Chen waiting in practice room 3 with the sheet music for Emily's piece. I brought the original version so you can see what changes we would need to make, Dr. Chen said. But first, play your simplified version for me. Sarah sat at the piano and played the piece she had been practicing. Even though she was nervous, the music flowed well. She only made one small mistake and she recovered quickly. That was lovely, Dr. Chen said when Sarah finished. Now, let me show you the differences in Emily's arrangement. Dr. Chen played parts of the original version. It was more complex, with additional ornaments and faster passages, but the basic melody was the same as what Sarah had been learning. With a few small additions, your version could work perfectly, Dr. Chen said. We would just need to add some of these decorative notes in the easier sections. Sarah looked at the music, then at Dr. Chen's encouraging face. She thought about all the nights she had spent listening to music through practice room doors, wishing she could be part of it. Now she had a chance to not just participate, but to help save the concert. Okay, Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. I'll do it. Double quotes. Dr. Chen's face lit up with joy. Wonderful. We have 5 days to prepare. It will be intensive, but I know you can do this. As Sarah walked home that night, she felt terrified and excited at the same time. In 5 days, she would walk onto a stage and perform for her first real audience. She had no idea that this decision would change her life forever. The next 5 days passed like a blur for Sarah. She had never worked so hard at anything in her entire life. Every spare moment was spent practicing the modified version of Chopin's Minute Waltz. Dr. Chen had adjusted the piece to match Sarah's skill level while keeping the essential beauty and challenge of the original. Sarah arrived at work each night, with her fingers already sore from practicing at home on her old keyboard. She would rush through her cleaning duties as quickly as possible, then spend every available minute in practice room 3. Her 2-hour practice sessions stretched to 3 hours, then 4. Sometimes Dr. Chen had to remind her to go home and get some sleep. You can't improve if you're exhausted, Dr. Chen warned her on Wednesday night. Your fingers need rest just like the rest of your body. But Sarah felt like she was running out of time. The piece was becoming more familiar each day, but she still made mistakes in the faster sections. Her biggest fear was that she would forget the music completely in front of the audience. What if my mind goes blank when I'm on stage? Sarah asked Dr. Chen during one of their emergency practice sessions. That's why we practice so much, Dr. Chen replied. We want your fingers to remember the music even if your mind gets nervous. Muscle memory is a pianist's best friend. Dr. Chen taught Sarah some techniques for dealing with performance anxiety. She showed her how to take deep breaths before playing and how to visualize playing the piece successfully from beginning to end. Professional musicians use these same techniques, Dr. Chun assured her. Even the most famous pianists get nervous before important performances. By Thursday, Sarah could play the entire piece without looking at the sheet music. Her fingers had memorized the patterns and the music flowed more naturally than before. But she was still worried about playing in front of people. That evening, Dr. Chun arranged for Sarah to play the piece for a small group of teachers from the school. Sarah's hands shook as she sat down at the piano in Dr. Chun's office, but she managed to play the piece from beginning to end with only 2 small mistakes. "Bravo!" said Mr. Williams, the violin teacher. "That was beautifully played. You should be proud of yourself." Ms. Rodriguez, who taught voice lessons, nodded in agreement. "Your interpretation has a lovely, natural quality. You don't sound like you're trying to impress anyone. You sound like you're sharing a story." The encouragement from the other teachers helped Sarah feel more confident, but she was still nervous about the much larger audience she would face on Friday night. "How many people will be there?" Sarah asked Dr. Chun as they walked back to practice room 3. "Usually about 300. Dr. Chun said, "Students, parents, family members, and some people from the community who enjoy our concerts. 300 people." Sarah tried to imagine that many faces looking at her, but the number felt too big to understand. She had never been in front of more than a dozen people at one time. On Friday morning, Sarah woke up feeling sick to her stomach. The concert was only 12 hours away. She tried to eat breakfast, but the food tasted like cardboard. She spent the day at home, alternating between practicing on her keyboard and pacing around her small apartment. Sarah had borrowed a black dress from her neighbor for the concert. It was simple but elegant, much nicer than anything she owned. When she tried it on, she barely recognized herself in the mirror. She looked like a real musician, not a cleaning lady. That afternoon, Dr. Chun called to check on her. "How are you?" "Feeling terrified," Sarah admitted. "I keep thinking I'm going to make a fool of myself." "You know what?" Dr. Chun said. "I have an idea. Come to the school an hour early before the audience arrives. You can practice on the actual concert. Piano and get comfortable with the stage." This was a good idea. Sarah had been practicing on the smaller upright pianos in the practice rooms, but the concert would be performed on the grand piano in the auditorium. The same beautiful Steinway where Dr. Chun had first discovered her playing. Sarah arrived at the school at 6 o'clock. The auditorium was empty except for Dr. Chun, who was arranging papers on the stage. The grand piano sat in the spotlight, looking both magnificent and intimidating. "Go ahead," Dr. Chun encouraged. "Play through the piece a few times. Get used to how it feels on this piano." Sarah walked onto the stage and sat at the familiar bench. The grand piano felt different from the practice room pianos. The keys were more responsive, and the sound was richer and fuller. When she played the opening notes of the Minute Waltz, the music filled the entire auditorium. "It sounds beautiful," Dr. Chun called from the audience seats. "Much better than in the practice room." Sarah played through the piece 3 times. Each time, it sounded more confident and musical. The grand piano seemed to bring out the best in her playing, making even the difficult passages sound smooth and effortless. "I think you're ready," Dr. Chun said as she joined Sarah on stage. "Remember, this audience wants you to succeed. They're not here to judge you. They're here to enjoy beautiful music." As Sarah prepared to leave the stage, she noticed that people were beginning to arrive for the concert. Through the auditorium windows, she could see families walking toward the building, dressed in their best clothes. Some carried flowers for the performers. "Those people are coming to hear me play," Sarah thought to herself. The idea still seemed impossible. Sarah went to the small dressing room behind the stage where the other performers were getting ready. There were about 20 students, ranging from young children to teenagers. They all looked confident and excited, chatting with their parents and warming up their instruments. Sarah felt very much alone in the busy room. She did not have family members there to support her, and she was much older than the other performers. She wondered if people would think it was strange to see a grown woman performing with children and teenagers. A few of the students recognized Sarah as the cleaning lady, and she heard them whispering to each other. "Isn't that the woman who cleans our classrooms?" one girl asked her mother. "Why is she here?" Sarah's face turned red with embarrassment. Maybe this had been a mistake. Maybe she did not belong here after all. Dr. Chun appeared at Sarah's side as if she had read her mind. "Sarah, I'd like you to meet some people." Dr. Chun introduced Sarah to several parents and explained that Sarah was a dedicated adult student who had learned the Chopin piece in just 2 weeks to help save the concert. Instead of looking down on her, the parents seemed impressed and interested. "How wonderful that you're learning piano as an adult," said one mother. "I've always wanted to take lessons myself, but I thought I was too old." "It's never too late." Sarah found herself saying, "Dr. Chun is an excellent teacher." As the time for the concert approached, Sarah's nervousness returned. Her hands felt cold and her heart was beating fast. She tried to remember Dr. Chun's breathing exercises, but it was hard to concentrate with so much noise and activity around her. The concert began with the youngest students performing simple pieces. Sarah watched from the wings as children as young as 6 years old played piano, violin, and flute. They were so small that some of them needed help reaching the piano pedals, but they played with joy and confidence. As each performer finished, the audience applauded warmly. Sarah began to understand what Dr. Chun had meant about the audience, wanting everyone to succeed. These people were here to celebrate music and the achievement of the students, not to criticize or judge. The older students performed more challenging pieces with impressive skill. Sarah was particularly amazed by a 16-year-old boy who played a complex piece by Rachmaninoff that sounded impossibly difficult. "He's been studying piano for 12 years, Dr. Chun whispered to Sarah. "But remember, he didn't play like that when he started." Every expert was once a beginner. Finally, Dr. Chun walked onto the stage to introduce Sarah's performance. Sarah heard her name being announced, and suddenly it was time. Her legs felt weak as she walked from the wings toward the piano, but somehow she managed to make it to the bench without falling. The auditorium was full of people, just as Dr. Chun had predicted. The lights were bright on the stage, making it hard to see individual faces in the audience. Sarah was grateful for this. It was easier to play for a room full of shadows than for 300 pairs of eyes. Sarah adjusted the bench to the right height and placed her hands on the keys. She took one deep breath, thought about the story of the playful dog, and began to play. The first notes of the Minute Waltz rang out clear and strong. Sarah felt her nervousness begin to fade as the familiar melody flowed from her fingers. She was no longer a scared cleaning lady sitting at a piano. She was a musician sharing a beautiful story with people who wanted to hear it. Sarah had never felt so alone and so visible at the same time. The stage lights were hot on her face, and she could feel 300 people watching her every move. The beautiful Steinway piano, which had felt like a friend during her practice sessions, suddenly seemed enormous and intimidating. She looked out at the audience and tried to find Dr. Chun's face among the crowd. The lights made it difficult to see beyond the first few rows, but she could make out the shapes of people sitting quietly, waiting for her to begin. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she placed them on the keys. She had played this piece dozens of times over the past 2 weeks, but now her mind felt blank. For a terrifying moment, she could not remember how the music started. Then she heard Dr. Chun's voice in her memory. "Think about the story. Remember the little dog playing and spinning in circles." Sarah closed her eyes for just a second and pictured the playful scene that Chopin had imagined when he wrote this piece. When she opened her eyes, her fingers knew what to do. The opening notes of the Minute Waltz filled the auditorium. Sarah's nervousness began to fade as the familiar melody took over. Her fingers moved across the keys with growing confidence, and she started to remember why she loved this piece so much. In the audience, people were settling back in their seats, some of them surprised by what they were hearing. Many of them had expected to hear Emily Patterson, one of the school's most advanced students. Instead, they were listening to a woman they had never seen before. Dr. Chun sat in the front row, watching Sarah with pride and anxiety. She knew how hard Sarah had worked to prepare for this moment, and she could see that Sarah was playing beautifully despite her obvious nervousness. As Sarah moved into the more challenging middle section of the piece, her confidence grew stronger. The passages that had given her so much trouble during practice were flowing smoothly now. Her fingers seemed to remember exactly where to go, even when her mind was focused on the emotion of the music rather than the technical details. In the third row, Mrs. Henderson leaned over to her husband. "Who is that woman? She's not one of the regular students." "I don't know," Mr. Henderson whispered back, "but she plays beautifully. Listen to how expressive her phrasing is." Sarah was lost in the music now. The audience, the stage lights, and her own nervousness had faded into the background. She was telling Chopin's story through her fingers, painting pictures of joy and playfulness with every note. The piece built to its most technically demanding section, where the melody spun in rapid circles like the dog chasing its tail. Sarah's hands moved quickly across the keys, but she did not rush. Dr. Chun had taught her that fast music should still breathe and flow, not sound frantic or desperate. As she played this challenging passage, Sarah felt a surge of pride. 3 months ago, she could barely play Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star on her old keyboard. Now she was performing Chopin in front of hundreds of people, and she was doing it well. In the audience, some people were leaning forward in their seats, drawn in by Sarah's passionate interpretation. There was something different about her playing, something raw and emotional that touched their hearts in ways that technically perfect student performances sometimes did not. Dr. Chun noticed the audience's reaction and smiled to herself. She had suspected that Sarah possessed this special quality, the ability to connect with listeners on an emotional level, but she had not been sure how it would translate to a live performance. Sarah approached the final section of the piece, where the playful melody gradually slowed down and became more gentle, like the little dog getting tired from all its spinning and finally lying down to rest. Her touch on the keys became softer and more delicate, and the music seemed to float through the air. She played the last few measures. Sarah realized that something magical had happened. She had not just survived her first public performance. She had truly enjoyed it. For those few minutes on stage, she had felt completely free and completely herself. The final notes of the minute waltz hung in the air for a moment before fading away. Sarah lifted her hands from the keys and looked out at the audience for the first time. Since she had begun playing, the auditorium was completely silent. For a heart-stopping moment, Sarah wondered if she had played badly and the audience was too shocked to respond. She looked toward Dr. Chun in the front row, trying to read her expression. Then Dr. Chun began to clap, slowly at first, then with increasing enthusiasm. The sound seemed to break a spell, and suddenly the entire auditorium erupted in applause. People were not just clapping politely, they were clapping with real enthusiasm and appreciation. Sarah saw people in the audience smiling and nodding their heads. Some of them were even standing up. Sarah stood up from the piano bench, feeling dizzy with relief and amazement. She had done it. She had actually performed Chopin in front of 300 people, and they seemed to have enjoyed it. Dr. Chun had taught her to bow after performing, so Sarah gave a small, nervous bow toward the audience. The applause grew even louder, and more people stood up from their seats. As Sarah walked off the stage, her legs felt shaky, but her heart was soaring. She had never experienced anything like the rush of performing for a live audience. It was terrifying and wonderful at the same time. In the wings, Dr. Chun was waiting for her with tears in her eyes. "Sarah, that was absolutely beautiful. I'm so proud of you." "Did I really do okay?" Sarah asked, still not quite believing what had just happened. "You did more than okay," Dr. Chun said, giving her a hug. "You moved people. Did you hear that? Applause? That was not polite clapping. That was genuine appreciation for beautiful music." Other performers were congratulating Sarah as well. The students who had whispered about her earlier were now looking at her with respect and curiosity. "That was amazing," said Jennifer, a high school student who had performed earlier in the concert. "I've never heard the Minute Waltz played. With so much feeling, how long have you been studying piano?" "Only about 3 months," Sarah said quietly. Jennifer's eyes widened with surprise. 3 months? But you played like you've been studying for years. As the concert continued with the remaining performers, Sarah found a seat in the back of the auditorium to watch. She was still processing what had just happened to her. 3 months ago, she had been afraid to even touch the piano in this same auditorium. Tonight, she had performed on that same piano for hundreds of people. The other students continued to perform beautifully. But Sarah noticed that several people in the audience kept looking back at her and whispering to each other. She overheard fragments of conversation. "Who was that woman? She played so beautifully. I wonder if she teaches lessons." When the concert ended, people did not rush to leave as they usually did. Many of them approached Sarah to compliment her performance and ask about her story. She found herself surrounded by curious parents and community, members who wanted to know more about the mysterious adult student who had captivated them with her playing. "I've always wanted to learn piano," said one elderly woman. "You've inspired me to finally take lessons. If you can learn to play like that in 3 months, maybe there's hope for me too." A middle-aged man shook Sarah's hand enthusiastically. "That was the most moving performance of the evening. You have a real gift for expressing emotion through music." Sarah felt overwhelmed by all the attention and compliments. She was not used to being the center of positive attention, and she did not know how to respond to so much praise. But Dr. Chun appeared at her side and helped guide her through the crowd of well-wishers. "Sarah needs some time to process this experience," she told the people gathered around them. "But I'm sure she appreciates your kind words." As they finally made their way out of the auditorium, Dr. Chun put her arm around Sarah's shoulders. "How are you feeling?" Sarah took a deep breath. "I feel like I just discovered something about myself that I never knew existed. Is this what it's always like to perform?" Dr. Chun smiled. "Every performance is different, but the best ones, the ones where you connect with your audience the way you did tonight, those are special. You have a natural gift for communicating through music, Sarah. Tonight proved that." As Sarah drove home through the quiet streets, she kept replaying the evening in her mind. The applause, the compliments, the feeling of sharing her music with others, it had all been more wonderful than she had ever imagined. She had no idea that this was just the beginning of a journey that would transform her life in ways she could never have predicted. As Sarah sat at the beautiful Steinway piano on the stage of Whitmore Academy, something remarkable began to happen. The nervousness that had been building inside her for days started to melt away like ice in warm sunlight. Her fingers found their home on the familiar keys, and the opening notes of Chopin's Minute Waltz rang out clear and pure. But this was not the same Sarah who had practiced nervously in the small practice room. This was not even the same Sarah who had played tentatively for the small group of teachers just the day before. Something had awakened in her the moment she began to play for this large audience. The music that flowed from her fingers was transformed. Where there had been careful technical accuracy in her practice sessions, there was now deep emotional expression. Where there had been hesitation and self-doubt, there was now confidence and joy. Sarah was not just playing the notes that Chopin had written. She was telling his story with her own voice. In the audience, people began to lean forward in their seats. This was not what they had expected to hear. Most of the student performances that evening had been technically impressive but predictable. This woman, this mysterious performer they had never seen before, was playing with a level of emotional depth that was both surprising and captivating. Dr. Chun watched from the front row with growing amazement. She had known that Sarah had musical talent, but she had not anticipated this level of artistry. Sarah was not just executing the piece correctly, she was interpreting it with the sensitivity of a much more experienced musician. The first section of the waltz danced lightly under Sarah's fingers, playful and graceful like the little dog that Chopin had imagined. But as the music moved into the more complex middle passages, Sarah's interpretation became even more remarkable. She shaped each phrase with natural musical instincts, speeding up and slowing down in ways that made the music breathe and come. Live Mrs. Patterson, whose daughter Emily was supposed to have performed this piece, whispered to her husband, "She's playing it better than Emily ever has. Listen to how she makes each note speak." Sarah herself was completely lost in the music now. The stage lights, the audience, even her own nervousness had disappeared. She was in a place where only the music existed, where her emotions could flow directly through her fingers onto the keys and into the hearts of everyone listening. The challenging, rapid passages in the middle of the piece, which had given Sarah so much trouble during practice, now flowed effortlessly. Her hands moved across the keys with newfound grace and precision. But more importantly, she was not just playing the notes, she was making them sing with meaning. As the music spun through its playful circles, building in intensity and joy, Sarah felt a surge of pure happiness unlike anything she had ever experienced. This was what she had been searching for her entire life without even knowing it. This feeling of complete connection between her inner self and the beautiful sounds she was creating. The audience was completely under her spell now. In the fifth row, an elderly man who had attended dozens of these school concerts found himself wiping tears from his eyes. He had never been moved by a student performance before, but something about this woman's playing touched a place. Deep in his heart, a teenage girl who had been forced to attend the concert by her parents put down her phone and listened with complete attention for the first time all evening. She had always thought classical music was boring, but this woman made it sound alive and exciting. Dr. Chun noticed that the usual concert hall sounds, people shifting in their seats, programs rustling, quiet conversations, had completely stopped. The entire audience was focused on Sarah's performance with an intensity that was rare even in professional concert halls. As Sarah approached the final section of the piece, where the playful energy gradually transforms into something more gentle and reflective, her touch on the keys became even more expressive. She was not just playing notes anymore, she was painting emotions in sound, creating a story that everyone in the audience could understand without words. The music began to slow down and become more contemplative, like the little dog finally getting tired from all its spinning and settling down to rest. Sarah's fingers caressed the keys with incredible tenderness, drawing out every ounce of beauty from Chopin's melody. In these final measures, Sarah added something that she had never done in practice, small, subtle changes in timing and dynamics that came from pure musical intuition. She held certain notes just a fraction longer than written, letting them resonate with extra meaning. She played some passages slightly softer than others, creating shadows and highlights in the music. Like an artist working with light and color. Dr. Chun recognized what was happening and felt goosebumps rise on her arms. Sarah was not just performing the piece, she was making it her own, adding her personal interpretation in ways that showed true musical maturity. The audience could feel that something special was happening, even if they did not have the musical knowledge to understand exactly what it was. They sensed that they were witnessing a moment of pure artistic truth. When a performer connects so completely with the music that the boundaries between player and composition disappear. As the last notes of the minute waltz began to fade away, Sarah played them with such delicate beauty that they seemed to float in the air like soap bubbles, perfectly formed and impossibly fragile. She let the final chord ring out for just the right amount of time before lifting her hands from the keys with slow, graceful precision. The silence that followed was profound and complete. It was not the awkward silence of an audience unsure how to respond. It was the reverent silence of people who had just experienced something beautiful and needed a moment to absorb it fully. Sarah sat at the piano bench, her hands still poised above the keys, breathing deeply as she slowly returned from the magical place where the music had taken her. She had never felt anything like what had just happened. It was as if she had discovered a part of herself that she never knew existed. In the audience, Dr. Chun was the first to begin clapping, but her applause was different from the polite appreciation that usually followed student performances. She was clapping with genuine emotion, her eyes bright with tears of pride and amazement. The sound of her applause seemed to release the audience from the spell that Sarah's performance had cast over them. One by one, then in groups, then all together, 300 people rose to their feet and began to applaud with an enthusiasm that shook the walls of the auditorium. But this was not just applause, it was celebration. People were not just clapping their hands, they were calling out, "Bravo!" and "Beautiful!" Some were wiping tears from their eyes. Others were looking around at their neighbors with expressions of wonder, as if to confirm that what they had just heard was real. The standing ovation continued for what felt like an eternity. Sarah stood up from the piano bench on unsteady legs, still not quite believing what had just happened. She looked out at the sea of standing, applauding people, and felt overwhelmed by their response. She had prepared herself for polite applause, maybe even some appreciation for her effort as an adult beginner. But this reaction was beyond anything she had imagined. These people were not just being kind to a nervous amateur, they were celebrating a genuine, artistic achievement. As the applause finally began to die down and people started to return to their seats, Sarah gave a deeper bow than she had planned. The appreciation of the audience had moved her almost as much as playing the music had. She felt a connection with these strangers that was unlike anything she had ever experienced. Walking off the stage, Sarah's legs felt weak, but her heart was soaring. She had not just survived her first public performance, she had discovered something about herself that would change the course of her entire life. Dr. Chun was waiting for her in the wings with tears streaming down her face. "Sarah," she whispered, "that was extraordinary. You didn't just play that piece, you transformed it into something magical." As Sarah stood in the darkness behind the stage, still hearing the echo of applause in her ears, she knew that her life had just taken a turn that she could never have predicted. The cleaning lady, who had been afraid to touch a piano 3 months ago, had just moved an audience of 300 people with the power of her musical expression. She had no idea that news of her performance would spread throughout the community, or that her phone would start ringing with opportunities she had never dreamed possible. All she knew was that she had found her true calling, and there was no going back to the person she used to be. The silence that followed Sarah's performance seemed to stretch on forever. She sat at the piano bench, her hands still trembling slightly from the intensity of what she had just experienced. The last notes of Chopin's Minute Waltz hung in the air like a whispered secret that everyone in the auditorium had been privileged to hear. For a moment that felt like an hour, nobody moved. The 300 people in the audience sat completely still, as if they were afraid that any sound might break the magic spell that Sarah had woven around them. Even the young children, who usually fidgeted during classical music performances, sat quietly with wide eyes. Then, from the front row, Dr. Chun began to clap. But her applause was not the polite, measured clapping that usually followed student performances. Her hands came together with genuine emotion, and tears were running down her cheeks as she looked up at Sarah on the stage. The sound of Dr. Chun's heartfelt applause seemed to wake the audience from their trance. One person began clapping, then another, then suddenly the entire auditorium erupted in the most enthusiastic ovation that Whitmore Academy had ever heard. But this was more than just applause. People were rising from their seats, first a few individuals, then entire rows, until every single person in the auditorium was standing and clapping with pure joy and amazement. The sound was thunderous, echoing off the walls and ceiling of the concert hall. Sarah stood up from the piano bench, on shaking legs, hardly able to believe what she was seeing and hearing. She had never imagined that her simple performance could generate such a response. The sea of standing, applauding people stretched out before her like a dream that was too wonderful to be real. "Bravo!" someone called out from the back of the auditorium. "Beautiful!" shouted another voice. Soon there were calls of appreciation coming from all over the audience. Some people were wiping tears from their eyes. Others were turning to their neighbors with expressions of wonder, as if they needed confirmation that what they had just witnessed was real. Mrs. Henderson, who had been attending these school concerts For 5 years, while her daughter studied violin, leaned over to her husband with tears in her eyes. In all the concerts I've been to, I've never heard anything like that. Who is that woman? The standing ovation continued for nearly 5 minutes, an eternity in concert hall time. Sarah tried to bow gracefully as Dr. Chun had taught her, but her emotions were overwhelming. She had never felt so exposed and so celebrated at the same time. Finally, as the applause began to fade and people started to return to their seats, Sarah walked off the stage with her heart pounding. She felt like she was floating on air, but also like she might collapse from the intensity of the experience. Dr. Chin was waiting for her in the wings, and the moment Sarah stepped off stage, her teacher wrapped her in a warm hug. "Sarah, that was absolutely extraordinary. I have never heard you play with such emotion and artistry. You didn't just perform that piece, you made it come alive. Did I really do well?" Sarah asked, still not quite able to believe the audience's reaction. "I felt like I was in a dream while I was playing." "You did more than well," Dr. Chun said, holding Sarah at arm's length and looking into her eyes. "You move people in a way that most professional musicians can only hope to achieve. That performance came from your heart, and everyone in the audience felt it." As the concert continued with the remaining student performers, Sarah found a seat in the back of the auditorium to watch. But she quickly realized that she had become the center of attention. People kept turning around to look at her, whispering to each other and pointing in her direction. During the intermission, Sarah was surrounded by audience members who wanted to meet her and learn more about her story. She felt overwhelmed by all the attention, but also deeply moved by the genuine warmth and enthusiasm of their responses. "I've been attending these concerts for 10 years, said Mr. Williams, a retired music teacher from the community. "That was one of the most moving performances I've ever heard. You have a rare gift for communicating through music." An elderly woman named Mrs. Garcia approached Sarah with tears still fresh in her eyes. "Your playing reminded me of my grandmother, who used to play piano for our family when I was a little girl. She played with the same kind of love that you showed tonight. Thank you for bringing back those beautiful memories." A teenage boy who had performed earlier in the evening came up to Sarah during intermission. "I've been studying piano for 8 years, he said, "but I've never played with the kind of feeling you showed tonight. How do you make the music sound so emotional?" Sarah did not know how to answer his question. "I just tried to tell the story that I heard in the music," she said. "Dr. Chen taught me that every piece has something to say." Word of Sarah's remarkable performance spread quickly through the community. By the time the concert ended, several people had approached her with unexpected opportunities. Mr. Patterson, a local businessman whose daughter attended the school, introduced himself to Sarah. "I own a restaurant downtown, and we have live music on weekend evenings. Would you be interested in playing piano for our guests? I think they would love to hear someone with your talent." Mrs. Thompson, who taught piano lessons privately, made an even more surprising offer. "I've been looking for someone to help me teach adult students," she said. "Many adults want to learn piano but feel intimidated by traditional teachers. Someone like you, who understands what it's like to start later in life, would be perfect for working with them." But the most life-changing conversation came from Dr. Susan Martinez, the dean of the local community college's music program. She had heard about the remarkable performance and had come to the concert specifically to hear Sarah play. "I would like to offer you a full scholarship to study music at our college," Dr. Martinez told Sarah as the evening was winding down. "We have an excellent program for adult students who want to pursue music seriously. Based on what I heard tonight, I believe you have the talent and passion to become a professional musician." Sarah stared at Dr. Martinez in shock. "A scholarship? But I've only been playing for 3 months. I'm not qualified for college-level music study." "Musical talent is not measured only in years of study," Dr. Martinez replied. "What you demonstrated tonight, that ability to connect emotionally with your audience, is something that cannot be taught. It's a gift that you either have or you don't, and you clearly have it." Dr. Chun, who had been listening to this conversation, put her hand on Sarah's shoulder. "I think you should seriously consider this opportunity. Sarah, you've already proven that you can learn quickly and perform beautifully. With proper training, there's no limit to what you could achieve." As Sarah drove home that night, her mind was spinning with possibilities she had never imagined. 3 months ago, she had been a lonely cleaning lady whose biggest dream was to play simple songs on her old keyboard. Tonight, she had received offers to perform professionally, teach other students, and study music at the college level, but more importantly, she had discovered something about herself that changed everything. She was not just someone who enjoyed listening to music or playing as a hobby. She was someone who could create beauty and touch people's hearts through her musical expression. Over the following weeks, Sarah's life transformed completely. She accepted the scholarship to the community college music program, where she began studying piano seriously with excellent teachers. She also started giving lessons to other adult students who, like her, had always dreamed of learning music but thought it was too late. Her story spread throughout the city, inspiring other adults to pursue their own musical dreams. Sarah became known as the woman who proved that it's never too late to discover your true calling. 6 months after her first performance, Sarah gave her first full recital as a college student. The auditorium was packed with people who had heard about her remarkable journey from cleaning lady to accomplished pianist. Once again, she received a standing ovation, but the most meaningful moment came after the recital, when a middle-aged man approached her with his young daughter. "My daughter has been studying piano for 2 years," he said, "but she wanted to quit because she thought she wasn't good enough. After hearing your story and watching you perform tonight, she's decided to keep studying. You've shown her that music is not about being perfect, it's about sharing something beautiful with others." Sarah looked down at the little girl, who was clutching her piano books and smiling shyly. "Music is the most wonderful gift you can give to yourself and to others," Sarah told her. "Never give up on something that brings you joy." As Sarah continued her musical journey, she never forgot the night that changed everything. She often returned to Whitmore Academy to visit Dr. Shun and to volunteer with the music program. And sometimes late at night when the building was quiet, she would sit at the same grand piano where her story began and play Chopin's Minute Waltz, the piece that had transformed her from an invisible cleaning lady into a musician whose story would inspire others for years to come. Sarah's journey proved that talent can emerge at any age, that dreams are never too big if you have the courage to pursue them, and that sometimes the most beautiful music comes from the most unexpected places.